Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the official Do Good Better podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Kirby. And of course, we talk with small nonprofits, medium-sized nonprofits doing great big things. We're kicking off the second season a little different this time because we've got an incredible guest for you today. I would probably maybe classify her as sort of notoriously curious. I think a lifelong learner. She's a cat mom to a cat that I believe is 18 years old. Congratulations on that. She's a horse mom of a horse that's 28 years old, 23 years. Well, we're going to get to that in a second. An old horse. This is kind of a crazy thing. She also happens to be heavily involved in Recovery Reinvented and recovery in the state of North Dakota. Oh, and as a sidebar, she might be the first lady of our state of North Dakota. Kathryn Burgum, welcome to the official Do Good Better podcast.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for having me. I'm so excited to have this opportunity with you today.
I am super excited, and thank you so much for being a guest. And I figure we should probably start from the start. If somebody has been living under a rock, or they live in a part of the country that thinks the Dakotas is one state, why don't you tell the audience who are flipping through some of their favorite podcast channels who you are, what you do, how'd you get to the place where Kathryn Burgum is?
Well, okay. Well, it's, interesting journey. And, I would probably sort of call myself an accidental first lady.
I like that.
Because certainly it was never on my radar to have this role. But I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I had a fantastic life. And then, my boyfriend, now husband, came home one day and said, I think I'm going to run for governor. And I was like, oh, what? That's scary, but, it's been incredible. It's sort of like just when you think you have your life planned, some door opens and you walk through it and you have a whole new life and whole new opportunities. And so, just being flexible and being open to what the sort of universe has to offer is a good thing, at least in my belief. But, when I became first lady, first partners, people choose platforms, like, what am I going to do? Who do I believe I maybe could help? And prior to becoming first lady, I'd never talked about my own recovery publicly. And it was just like, okay, now is the time. In fact, 5 minutes before I did my first newspaper interview as first lady, I told my husband, I'm going to talk about my recovery. And he was shocked, and super supportive. And, and then I sort of, walked through that door and decided that could be one way maybe that I could, by sharing my story, help others and help galvanize and, motivate people to do the same. And because that is one way that we can help eliminate the shame and stigma of addiction. And specifically, my focus is eliminating the shame and stigma of addiction, because that's what holds people back. It holds people back from reaching out for help, holds families back, holds communities back, and it's just, it's a disease. And, we can talk more about that, but, there should be no shame and there should be no stigma. So here I am today, hopefully, I'm almost at the end of our first term, and so grateful for the opportunity to experience everything. I mean, I've been invited to the White House, because when I first started talking about my addiction and recovery, it was, at the height of the opioid crisis. And because I was open about my own story, I was invited to the White House to participate in a lot of discussions around that topic and around addiction and recovery. And so being able to do that and being able to, and there might be someone joining us here. Oh, there he is. This is my 18-year-old cat, Mr. Gray. Say hello, okay, buddy. Yeah, he likes to.
It's a 2-for-1 guest podcast experience.
It is, right. I'll try to, hopefully he won't dominate the conversation, but but anyway, so, again, back to the opportunity, and also have been able to connect with just so many groups in our state, and a lot has sprung up as a result of that. And really, we're a nonprofit, trying to make a difference, and there's a lot of people involved. So I'm just grateful at the bottom line, in the end of the day, just grateful every day.
Yeah. Well, you said something interesting, and I think that's what I love about Recovery Reinvented is the idea that a lot of it's based on eliminating a stigma. And you know well that we live in the Midwest, which is for those listening in other states, we have a tendency to tell people to buck up, or hey, this is not really necessarily an issue. There's a mindset here that when it comes to addiction, there's that sort of well, why don't you just fix it, or why don't you just sort of deal with it? And how do you start that conversation, or how do you start tweaking people's mindset that this is not necessarily a, hey, buck up and get over this and just stop it? No, this is an addiction. And how do we begin to have that conversation? I find that fascinating.
Well, I completely understand that, because I thought the same thing. I thought I can have enough willpower. I mean, I could achieve any goal that I set for myself, whether it was running, half marathons, getting an MBA, getting job, all that, but I could not stop drinking, and I relapsed for 8 years. And finally I realized, that it's not about willpower. It's about, I have a disease, and I need to be treated like I have diabetes, or I have heart disease, or whatever. It's not something you can just wake up and say, okay, today I'm not going to drink, even though my life is crazy and I'm miserable, because it's a brain disease. Yeah. And that's what I tell people, now, because I completely get it. Once I figured out I have a disease, nobody would choose to relapse for 8 years and be so miserable and, and to lose so much in your life. So that to me is the biggest thing that changes people's minds, is when you can really help them understand it's a brain disease and it needs treatment just like any other disease. And it's, ultimately fatal without treatment. And so that's the, talking about the science behind this disease is so important.
Yeah. And I think just having individuals of your status talking about it helps others who might not have that platform to go, oh, if somebody of this, sort of magnitude of celebrity in the state is talking about this openly, maybe I can have a conversation with my family, with my individual friends, and that kind of helps. And I think that's the power where your platform gives, is that ability that people go, okay, I'm just like X, Y, and Z person, or I'm just like this. I didn't know, I thought I was alone. I think we tend to think of ourselves in a bubble. We don't think anybody else is experiencing the same things we're experiencing. And it turns out that we are. And,
right.
And that relatability to somebody who you would have never thought you would be relatable to is now addressing their steps, concerns, and really challenges openly. And I think that really has a benefit across the board.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I just got a text yesterday from someone who said, my son went to treatment, and oh, by the way, I'm in recovery. And, I didn't know that. I've known this person 10 years. And so it's just, the number of people, it is changing in our state. People are talking more about addiction and recovery. One of the things we wanted to figure out is, what is the level of shame and stigma? So we did a survey in our state, and nobody else has ever done this, to measure the level of stigma, because we knew, we couldn't, unless we had data, we couldn't really tell if we were making any progress. And so, we learned that 63% of the people in our state believe that addiction is a disease, which I thought was like incredible, really.
Wow.
But it still means that 1 in 3 people believe that addiction is a choice. So we still have work to do. And it also helps us kind of define which groups we need to be getting more involved with. And one of those groups really is corporate America. How can corporate America play a role in helping to eliminate stigma and creating more recovery-friendly workplaces? And that would include nonprofits also, obviously.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny that I think the corporate America, because, I don't know what the numbers are with individuals who have addiction, and you probably have that. But if you are a business that has 100 employees and you have a handful that have addiction issues, what are the costs to having that employee leave or have something happen at work, and then replacing that individual with the amount of training and X, Y? Wouldn't it be better benefit to you as a business owner to address these things up front, so that you don't have to have these extraordinary costs that you are not intending on having, but then you got caught flat-footed because you didn't have a plan together, or a realization that there are options to make sure that you're getting ahead of the game and addressing that with employees in stressful work environments, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, there are statistics out there. There's 23 million people with the disease of addiction across our nation, and 70% of them are employed full time.
Jeez.
So there's a company called Shatterproof. It's a nonprofit started by a guy who lost his son to addiction. They actually have a calculator on their website that corporations can use to figure out how the disease of addiction is impacting my specific company. It's very cool. I'd recommend anybody check it out. But that is where we find this information about, how many people are addicted and how, and that's why it's so important. 70%, that's why it's so important, because it's not just that person having the disease of addiction, it's their family members. You've got a mom who's going to work every day and, her daughter's homeless because she's struggling with addiction, and she's worried about that all the time, and so having the opportunity to have, places to talk and places to share, and, even separate groups, where people can meet and have lunch and learns, just creating this opportunity to just talk about it like it's diabetes or any other disease is so important.
I will ask this question very sarcastically. So I just want to start this off. I'm going to ask this the most sarcastic question I will ask you.
Okay.
But why Recovery Reinvented? Every human being is the same. I don't know why you would just have one flat sort of solution for everybody with the same background and same, age range and same situation in life. Why would you need to reinvent something as so simple and uncomplicated as recovery?
Simple and uncomplicated. Man, you nailed it. You nailed it. Okay, well, here's the thing, of course, everybody's different. There's lots of different roads and paths to recovery. People find their recovery in a lot of different ways, but the thing is, the reinventing part is really about taking a different look at recovery. And in my opinion, it's sharing stories, telling stories to help eliminate the shame and stigma. Yeah. Because that is, people can say, oh yeah, that's great, somebody else is doing it, but people, there's a lot of people I know that are in, public, positions that won't talk about it still because of the stigma and the shame. And so, we've got to reinvent how we look at the disease of addiction so that we can eliminate the shame and stigma. And so that's really what we've been focused on is, what are the different approaches? How can we work with different groups? I spoke at the FM Chamber of Commerce at their Eggs and Issues breakfast. Mm-hmm. And so what I do is, in those environments, I talk about the disease of addiction. I talk about how important it is to share stories. And I ask people to stand with me. I get emotional at those events, mm-hmm. and say that they're in recovery, which is really hard for people to do, but people do it. And then they feel like a big weight has been lifted off their shoulders, mm-hmm. and then people support them instead of hiding this. So that's a completely reinvent. I spoke at a tech conference in DC, and same thing. It's Amazon. It was an Amazon conference, and same thing. I asked people to stand if they were in recovery. And so I can't really do this work and say how important it is, yeah. without asking people to do it, to stand, yeah. with me and, to really execute when I'm actually meeting with people. And it's working, more people are understanding how important that is. And that's a reinvention, because that doesn't happen in corporate America.
No, not at all. Is there something about the nonprofit world and their sort of natural tendencies to be entrepreneur-like that makes their partnerships or partnering with those organizations effective for this sort of idea of reinventing the idea of recovery, or the boots on the ground sort of thing? I've always seen, and again, there's a lot of recovery nonprofits doing such good work here in our community for sure. But is there something, because they understand either individual cities and townships a little better than maybe the government does, that allows nonprofits to be easier and quicker to pivot on things and ideas that kind of come up than sort of the government as a whole? I mean, how do you perceive that? Because I love the idea that you are a nonprofit, because there's some swiftness, I believe, that you get the ability to do, rather than sort of the machine that takes a long time to sort of chug along and change.
That's right. Yes, you hit the nail on the head. Nonprofits can be, they usually are started by people with a passion to fill a gap and help people, or help, in different ways. And they can be nimble, they're innovative, they're flexible, they
Hmm.
usually think way out of the box. And so they're not likely to start something that's already being filled by government. North Dakota, we are extremely lucky because we have the North Dakota Behavioral Health Team led by Pam Sagnis.
Yeah.
And, we are doing things that no other state is doing. Like, so we're the envy of the nation, especially related to behavioral health, mental illness, and addiction and recovery.
Mhm.
And so they're filling a ton of gaps, but we have so many other groups across our state that are working really hard to do things like, provide housing for people that, are in between, they need a place to stay so that they can get their life back on track before they, head out into the world, and we've got people that are helping people get out of prison, when they first get out of prison, helping them find a place to live and a job and get their driver's license back, and so there's a lot of nonprofits out there, but, and they have the ability to raise money quickly, to get, to fill the gap, and service those that are in need. And so I think you hit the nail on the head. It's an entrepreneurial opportunity. It's usually those people with a passion for filling a gap and solving problems. And that's why it's also incredibly important to collaborate with government to
Yes.
help, fill those gaps, because there's an opportunity for a financial, injection that can help as well. So for us, when we started, because I'm a volunteer for the state of North Dakota, I'm not an employee for the
Yeah.
state of North Dakota. This is my volunteer job, which I love. And when we decided to do the Recovery Reinvented event the first year, we partner with the state of North Dakota. We partner with them every year, the
Mhm.
behavioral health team. But there are some things that they can't necessarily do or spend money on. So then that's what we do. We fill that gap, so that we decided we needed to be a nonprofit to be able to do that. And then the governor went even further and said, because we knew that this needed to be important. People needed to understand how important this was to the administration, to my husband and I. So he created, by executive order, the Office of Recovery Reinvented, which is an incredible thing, because that does not happen in other states.
No.
There isn't, an office created solely to focus on recovery. And Jenny Olson, an ex-Microsoft employee, heads up that office. And then we've got Joey Ness on my team. So I've got a great team of people that are really focused on this. And then we partner very heavily with DMF and Dakota Medical Foundation and lots of other groups. So many people have supported this effort. And we're so grateful for those people but it's just like corporations, different groups, different nonprofit, who is not affected in some way by the disease of addiction. So it's kind of easy for people to step up to the plate and say, okay, I'm going to get behind you to help make a difference in our state and even across the nation.
It's one of my favorite sort of, how can the government and the nonprofit work hand in hand, because the nonprofits have people power. The government's got sort of, we understand where the gaps are, and we can sort of help financially to sort of give some structure to some of those things. And I think that's why it works so well in North Dakota, because we have this sort of entrepreneurial mindset in the state in general.
Yes.
And then just that trickling down to the nonprofits is super fun. And we could talk about the sort of Recovery Reinvented and all these things a night and day. I love it, but I think there's way more interesting questions to ask, especially this one. I know you might not have gotten asked this a lot, but I know Recovery Reinvented is like your big thing. But do you have as Kathryn Burgum, do you have a big, hairy, audacious goal outside of the realm of recovery, or is this your true north mission, and this is all your focus on for the future as it holds? Or is there some other thing that, not that you're going to solve recovery, but you're well on the way to sort of putting it in the right direction on a lot of things? Is there a big, hairy, audacious goal? We asked this a lot of our nonprofit friends who are interviewed on there. What is that? Right.
Well, that's a great question. I am always going to be focused on helping and doing what I can to eliminate the shame and stigma around the disease of addiction until there is no shame and stigma.
Right.
So that's, that is always going to be my goal. And I've been, the other goal that I've had, which is again, something I never really thought would be something I'd be focused on. And it has been part of my mission is to collaborate with Native Americans in our state who are, Native Americans across the nation are most adversely affected by the disease of addiction. I'm also on the board of Hazel and Betty Ford. I am, we need to, in my role on the board, I bring that to their attention quite often that, we should be really targeting the groups that are most significantly affected or adversely affected. But through this work I've been doing, I've been lucky enough to have people reach out to me from the Native Americans across our state, from the various tribes, and say, hey, let's work together. And I'm happy to do that. And some of them have taken incredible steps. Like MHA, for instance, created this really great thing called the Door, which is a recovery community center, basically. Yeah. And so they're focusing on doing what they can at where they are to help the people that are close to them in their communities. But in my opinion, in general, I have met with the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, Tara Sweeney, in DC. The topics around recovery and treatment and the disease of addiction, but there's so much more, I believe that it has to be nonprofits. It has to be local governments. It has to be people that are, that care and are passionate about helping people in general. Just, whether it's a homeless population, whether it's abused women, whether it's, abused children, they're nonprofits that step up to the plate to help those groups. I'm sorry, but Native Americans we don't talk about, that how much people don't know that the average lifespan is 55 years old. So there is in the state of North Dakota, that's the true story. Average lifespan across the nation is 75 years old. So it's not just, it's children's programs. It's opportunities to be engaged in a lot of other things, that the 100-year-old system is broken and doesn't provide that opportunity. So that is an area of focus. And so I'm also thinking about, I'm actually want to start a podcast. I used to do a lot of speaking. Right. So I'll be, calling you up for some consulting on, how to do that. But, because I'm lucky to be in this position where I have, the title of First Lady in front of my name, where I may be able to, I should say, I may be able to get people to engage with me on a lot of different topics, even outside of recovery and addiction and treatment. And so that is really the path I see myself going on next. And I'm not sure it kind of depends on who the people are that I interview, probably, in terms of what we will. But, I follow podcasts like Dax Shepard, and who's a guy that's in recovery, very open about it. Yeah. But he talks to a lot of different people and, sort of a pulse on what's happening across the nation. There's always addiction and recovery. So I love that approach. But, so I am, I know Dr. Drew pretty well. I know, I've been able to engage with a lot of different people and at a lot of different levels. So I'm really excited about that. And because, I was doing a lot of speaking, with groups, and that whole model is going to change. So, so that's where I see myself going next is, working on a podcast. And so, I'll be going to podcast training 101 to, see how I can get my game on with that.
I'll subscribe right away. I promise that one. And I think in this medium, you get to talk to a whole bunch of people, and you realize that regardless of title or position, we all have the same sort of issues and fears and trials and tribulations. And I think this humanizes a lot of people that you don't think you relate to. Kind of back to our original kind of conversation was how do you use your platform to sort of reach out to people who don't think that they connect with anybody else. I think that as connected as we are on the internet, we seem to be less connected on sort of the haves and have-nots. Like mentally, I don't think I have enough, or I don't have this or that. you have a conversation like this with other people with different backgrounds and personalities, and you realize you're just the same. And especially, you know, this pandemic has really been the great equalizer on everybody's affected by it. And so people can now relate on a level that they don't think they related to prior
Right.
to. It's been like the great pause in our society to say, what do we value the most and how do we relate to each other? And I think maybe that opens up some doors.
Yes.
Got to have some of those conversations with people that they might not think that they get to talk to or relate to, which leads me to another question I have, because I know a lot of nonprofits listen to this show, and people of influence is always something that they're trying to get, you know, sort of a hold of, and to not do it creepily is a very difficult task. And I know that, you know, people who have influence and who have you know, sort of connections are always asked for other nonprofits to do something. Oh, can you help us here and here and here? There's too many. You can only select a few. How does a nonprofit entity, not necessarily to you, but how does a nonprofit entity have that conversation or begin the process of addressing or meeting or hanging out with someone who is in a position of influence and connected?
Right, right. Well, obviously, you know, you do your homework to figure out what is the connection and why would this person be interested in what you are trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think the other thing is you really got to get your act together. You know, you got to have you got to really function like you're a smooth running machine relative to a business. You got to have great transparency, you know, great leadership. But you know, you need to, you know, function like, you know, you need to really focus on the financials, you know, what's the, you know, and because I think that the best that you can do is sort of create an opportunity for you to work yourself out of a business almost as a nonprofit, you know.
Yes.
How can you have this, you know, have that opportunity? So when you have your ducks in a row, that's really important. And again, you know, when you can connect with someone, you know, obviously a compelling story is interesting. But the other thing that I think that you could do is people's most valuable asset is their time.
Yes.
So how do you create a model that doesn't suck up a lot of people's time or doesn't cause them to have to go to an event where they, you know, and a lot of people are very social. They like that. They want to go to an evening thing where there's, you know, auctions or there's live things and a lot of yelling going on and things like that, that I don't particularly, but, you know, but how do you, you know, not yelling, but, you know, that there's, you know, or you got to change it up, you know, like, you know, how do you create an opportunity for people to make very quick decisions that doesn't take a lot of time, you know? And now we have that opportunity because we are such a more connected world through Zoom. You know, I've been in the last since the pandemic started, I do a lot of recovery support meetings, and I've been able to do a lot of those on Zoom, and that has really revolutionized people being able to connect with each other across the world. There's 500 people on these meetings across the nation, you know, across the world globally. And that could spur the idea that how do we use that model in a fundraising opportunity, you know, that creates, you know, it doesn't take up a lot of people's time. It creates, you know, push button opportunities to just donate right there. You know, there's, you know, so I think that's one thing that would be, you know, that, you know, Hazel and Betty Ford too, you know, even our model of delivering services and treatment to people is, you know, that model will change significantly because not everybody needs inpatient treatment. Not everybody needs to go to, so again, you have this delivery mechanism that everybody's grabbing onto because of the pandemic. So how do you utilize that to save people time, help people make quick decisions, and really engage them in your passion and what you're trying to achieve?
I really like what you said on the top of that too, which is, and I don't think we talk about it enough in the nonprofit world, is do your research. It's okay for people of influence to say, no, I'm not interested. And you're not under any obligation as any donor of any size to just give because you think you need to. It's connecting the dots from a nonprofit to say, all right, what do I know, or how can I learn something about my potential donor that doesn't have anything to do with the size of their wallet or checking account? Because if you know something about them that is intimately connected to your mission, I think that has way more benefit for a long-term relationship than just gimme, 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 gimme. And so my challenge to nonprofits always is know something better, make a connection and be authentic about it. Don't be like, I'm going to do this because I'm going to get money, right? Don't do it because you're genuinely interested in people. Go back to that Dale Carnegie principle of be genuinely interested in other people. Because I think that's going to make the long-term human connection that's going to allow them to be interested in the other things that you do, because you're just there connecting from likes and dislikes and loves. And that I think to me is the best route for helping out navigate these worlds of influencers as well. It's kind of,
For sure. And the other thing that you may not think about is, even if that person doesn't have a direct connection or a passion on your topic, they may know somebody else.
Yes.
And they may say, you know what, you may want to connect with this group because they're doing great work. They're doing, they've got great data, they've got X, Y, and Z, they've got their ducks in a row. And I know you're passionate about this, so you never know what the connection can be.
And I think you'll never know unless you have conversations that are something outside of, we need money, we need support, we need this. And that, I think that is just the most critical point. And again, like you just said, time is the most valuable resource people have now. So how do you make it invaluable for, I love having a conversation with this person, or I love reading about this person. I will take the time out of my day to do so because they just genuinely are, I'm genuinely interested in them as a relationship builder. I think that's brilliant advice. I tried to come up with, for this particular issue, because I've had you on the books for a couple of weeks and I've been so excited about it. And I know you probably get interviewed by a number of people in a number of different states and magazines and podcasts and everything else. So I tried to come up with a question that I guaranteed you've never been asked since taking office as our First Lady. And the question is as follows, Kathryn Burgum. It is a very important question, and I think everyone needs to know this. What is your favorite 90s boy band and why? I want to know if anybody's ever asked you this question, because I want to be in the show notes. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, no one has ever asked me that question.
Yes.
So good on you for finding one that's never been asked.
Yes.
And you know what? I was not particularly interested in boy bands in the 90s, but let me tell you, Madonna in the early 90s was super popular.
Yep.
She had a video out, in a song called Vogue, where you're like, everybody Vogue. Yep. And then the Gin Blossoms was a band, kind of more early 90s, a Tempe, Arizona band that I loved. And I played a lot of guitar back then, so I knew a lot of their songs. And I used to jam with a guy back then. But, the Macarena was also, oh yeah, who doesn't know the Macarena? But that's when it started, in the early 90s. So, of course, that was all going on. But you know what? I've become a boy band fan of the Joe Bros, the Jonas Brothers.
Yes.
I went to their concert last fall. I never thought I would ever do that, but I love a lot of their songs. I watched a documentary on Netflix, and that's how I even learned about them. Yep. So I decided to go, actually went to this concert by myself in Florida. I was there for something else. And, almost got trampled by thousands of, 15-year-old girls. But I felt like I was 15. It was very fun. It was very exciting. So, but I love music in general. I always have Spotify going, always have music going. Music is a huge part of my life. It's a place to escape. And so it's so fun to have all these different ways to listen to music these days. So yeah, good question. Good one.
I like the answer. And there is not a better bop in the world than Sucker by Jonas Brothers. My kids sing all the time. So that's the universal song that we can all agree upon. This is really great. I like that. I'm so excited for you to be a guest. I was so grateful for your time, but I can't leave this interview without sort of setting the table. If there's individuals who are listening, who are watching, who have giant sacks of money under their bed, and they want to make maximum impact in their community, how can they donate to Recovery Reinvented? Where's that money going to be used, and how much of an impact can they make by supporting you and your organization to do amazing work in the recovery world here in North Dakota?
Well, great question. Thanks for teeing that up. But, recoveryreinvented.com is our website. There are ways to donate there. And let me tell you where the money is going. So we're working on Recovery Reinvented 2020 now, which will be our 4th event. It's all virtual. Woo! So, it's free. Everybody can attend. And oh my gosh, when you can attend by just, turning on your computer, how cool is that? And then we have access to incredible speakers because, they just zoom in and, we're able to show them live. And so we are doing that again. We'll have a few people in the audience, but, because of social distancing, it will be almost all. And we've, in the past, even before the pandemic, we've had up to 1,500 people, in attendance, online, and we have watching parties and viewing parties, and people get together and do that. So, but that's all a cost. I mean, I was initially like, oh my gosh, it'll save us so much money to do this online. But, not surprisingly, technology, there's a cost to that, and to really do it well and to do it right. And so we still have those costs, some of the speakers, we still have those costs. We have, so that's what the money will go to, really helping us to create a Recovery Reinvented 2020 that's really going to blow people's minds and really help it. This year, it's going to be focused a lot on mental illness, the intersection of mental illness and addiction, which are so correlated and commingled. We're always going to focus on shame and stigma. We're going to talk about recovery, create recovery-friendly workplaces. We will have certainly a focus on Native American addiction and recovery. It's always just such an important topic. And so we, a lot of great. We're also going to talk about ACEs, acute childhood experiences, and how that is, a predictor of who gets severely affected by the disease of addiction and mental illness in their lives. Because if we can focus on helping children in schools through behavioral health counselors, so they can work through their anxiety and their depression and all these things that are a result of their childhood experiences, they can avoid having those struggles down the road. And so I believe that we can stop that cycle by creating resources and opportunities for young people in schools, grade schools and high schools, to be able to work through these things. So that's another area we're going to focus on. It's going to be great. And, we're always going to have our, I didn't want it to be from the beginning your typical conference. I wanted it to be TEDx-like, kind of a fast pace, a lot of different talk, but we've added this opportunity for music and art and culture, and we will have those things as a part of this as well. So it's going to be great. So that's, if anybody wants to make a donation, that is where the money is going to go, to Recovery Reinvented 2020.
Well, I love that, because you're fundraising to make sure that this is free for the majority of everyone else, so that they can experience this too. And I think that's the impact there is so great, is that there's no financial barrier to understand what's going on and what the things are and what schools can bring to early intervention in their own classrooms or their own programs at school, and especially done virtually. I think that's a really great stuff. We're kind of being at home and we're looking for things to do, with their kids, and then how to deal with that maybe when schools aren't necessarily in session the entire time, and how do you deal with that mental health stress on kids that leads to it's just brilliant. And I think that's what makes this whole piece of the thought of Recovery Reinvented, the idea that we can think differently about this, decrease the stigma, but really be creative in our entrepreneurial spirit here in North Dakota. Wonderful thing that you should donate to. And of course, we'll have all of those links in the show notes. So get out that giant sack of money hiding under your bed and go donate it right back to Recovery Reinvented. And that would be super great. Kathryn Burgum, thank you.
I want to say one more thing. When we do these conferences, we don't sort of just download a bunch of stuff and go, okay, do with it what you will. We actually have people say, and we have specific directions. This is what you should do next. Personally, this is what you should do next in your where you work. This is what you should do next in your community, step by step, because if you sort of leave a conference, you don't have any goals and you don't, you're sort of like, okay, yeah, oh yeah, that's right, I learned that, but you never really implement something. So I think that that's really important to look for the, very specific ideas and direction for what to do after Recovery Reinvented to help people that are struggling either in your lives or in your community. So thank you so much for recoveryreinvented.com. Everyone can go there to register or donate. We would be so grateful for both.
We will push as hard as possible, make that a reality. Kathryn, thank you so much for being a guest on the official Do Good Better podcast, the first guest of our second season of the official Do Good Better podcast. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for all you do, all the impact that you make, and really just being a champion and out there sort of helping others do good in this world. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Patrick, for all you do as well, guiding all those nonprofits out there that, need some leadership and direction and support and motivation. You're helping make a huge difference across our state with the work that you do. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Virtual high five. Yes, we did it. All right. Excuse